thank you. Everybody, welcome to the fourth Great Basin Climate Forum. This will be the third one that we have had in Reno. We had one in Klamath Falls last year. So thank you all for coming this morning on such a beautiful day. My name is Tamara and I work here at DRI, both in the Western Regional Climate Center and for the California-Nevada Applications Program, which is one of the co-sponsors of the forum. Just a few logistics really quick. Bathrooms are just down the hall. If anybody needs a restroom. Is there anything else other than bathrooms down the hall? Food, there's food and there's coffee and some snacks outside. We will be providing lunch, so we'll have lunch right about noon. We try really hard to keep the forum on time. We have a few people who are going to be coming for different parts of it today, so while we're not webcasting this time, it's not quite as rigorous. We are going to make every effort to keep things pretty timely. We have a lot of time for questions, and so everybody, if you think about questions, just jot those down. We'll have time after each speaker to talk in depth. Everybody, when you came in, should have gotten a pre-survey. If you could go ahead and fill that out, I'll collect those kind of at the end of my little talk here and pick those up. I do use those as I'm going to demonstrate in my talk today. What? I asked him and he just wants me to talk. Okay. So he declined. All right, so I have two basic little mini talks here. One is just a really brief overview of climate science services in the U.S., not to be confused with weather services. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how the forum has kind of unfolded over the last year and where we think it's going to go in the future, where we hope it's going to go. So one of the institutions the group that I work with in Kelly is the Deputy Director of the Western Regional Climate Center. Nina Oakley, who is here and was sitting at the registration table, is our Assistant Climatologist, is the Western Regional Climate Center. This is a national network that covers the entire United States. And they're what is defined as quasi-operational. So they host a lot of data. They bring a lot of different data in and provide that data mostly free of charge. There is some charges for some different types of data, but we're kind of a hosting service for a lot of data. We do some interpretation of that data as well, but it's primarily data-driven. One of the co-hosts of this is the California-Nevada Applications Program, and I'm very pleased to announce that we finally have a little brochure available on the table out there if you'd like to know more about what CNAP does. CNAP is a part of the Regional Integrated Science Assessment Teams, and these are funded by NOAA, as is the Regional Climate Centers. And our purpose is a little bit different. They're not necessarily tied to the RCCs, the Regional Climate Centers. They are here, mostly because of Kelly Redmond and Tim Brown's leadership. And so the RISAs are really designed to kind of work as what we call a boundary organization. So they're often working between people who use climate information and the people who produce climate information. And as I put it, they're trying to make what is often a rather long, narrow pipeline of climate information getting out actually to managers on the ground. What they're really trying to do is to figure out how to make that pipeline both wider and shorter, so information is flowing more freely and is more usable. Although they are not only climate related, the Landscape Conservation Cooperatives, here we're a part of the Great Basin LCC. This is a seamless network and it is national in scope as well. Todd, do you want to just briefly say something about the mission of the LCCs? Because I sometimes get it mixed up.
The conservation cooperatives are essentially conservation joint ventures. We are funded by the federal government, but self-run. We have each one of these conservation cooperatives has a steering committee that makes decisions about science priorities, funding, resource and cultural decisions that it works on. The goal of these is to really put more conservation design at a landscape scale and then put that design into practice through the partnership on the ground.
So in some
Linda
ways,
Kelly is the, wave your hand on that. Linda is the coordinator for for the Great Basin Conservation Cooperative, and I'm the science coordinator, and we have a research ecologist with USGS who's based in Boise, Idaho.
So in some ways, LCCs are boundary organizations as well, like the RCCs. And although I didn't mention it, I've also been going in terms of age. The RCCs are the oldest program. Kelly, are they about 26 years?
Yeah, 26, 27.
Yeah. The RISA program is 14 years old. The LCC network is 4. And then we have the new kid on the block are the Climate Science Centers, which are funded by DOI. And they are a national network as well. And the goal of the Climate Science Centers, and DRI is a host institution for for the Southwest Climate Science Center, as well as several other institutions. Their goal is really to provide the LCCs the information, the science information that they need. Would that be fair to say? And they're roughly 2 years old, roughly. So kind of descending order. So, we started out with really operational kind of climate information, and I think as we've progressed over the last 2.5 decades, different agencies have realized and seen the need more and more for these type of both boundary organizations as well as organizations that provide data and research organizations that are doing research and creating new data. And so how do the Great Basin Climate Forums fit into all of this? And so one thing that boundary organizations like RISAs and LCCs work a lot is we talk about stakeholders. And it occurred to me that I've always had a little bit of discomfort with that. I don't know why. Stakeholder. I go out to my thesaurus all the time and I look for different adjectives or different nouns to use, and I never find anything. And so I actually went back and looked at the dictionary definition a couple of days ago, and so it's talking about a stakeholder is somebody who holds all the money, which I thought was really funny. And I like the idea that there are wagers being made, because I was like, well, aren't we all making wagers right now, right? We're kind of making wagers that is climate changing, is not climate not changing, how is it going to affect me and what I have, the resource I have to manage, and we're all kind of making some bets and trying to hedge our bets, right? That's what uncertainty is about, is really trying to do that. Now the second definition, well, the first one is kind of funny. I think it really does speak to what a stakeholder is, and it's a person with an interest or a concern. And particularly participants seen as having an interest in success. And so when boundary organizations are talking about stakeholders, it really is a very broad group of people that we are trying to work with. And we're interested in working with anybody who has that interest in success. And here I think of success as successfully managing natural resources, successfully managing communities, community health, economies, and so the stakeholder really is a very broad group. And I just wanted to talk about that briefly, because that gets at why we started these Great Basin Climate Forums, as a boundary organization, and who we were trying to reach out to, and why I feel that they've been successful. So this series, this is the 4th one we've held. And the very first one, just real quick, who in here has been to all 3? I know, Ed, you have, right? So who else? So you have, and anybody else? Who's been to all 2? Who's been to 2 of the 3 held in Reno? So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So how many roughly is it? Will you do the count for me?
How many in 2? Put your hands up high. You guys.
There's a reason I'm asking this. You'll see.
Okay.
Okay, you got the count? All right. So the very first one, so Kelly and Todd and I basically cooked up this idea about a month ahead of time. And I was like, how do we define success? And we thought about it. I said, if we have 35 people show up, it will be successful. I just used a really simple metric. And we had 80 people, including 22 on the webinar, register. I think we ended up having actually about 55 in the room. There's always a little bit of fluctuation with who, people can't come at the last minute and, things like that. And so we were like, wow, that was way more than we thought we'd get. And then the Reno meeting last fall, we ended up having 109 registered. Again, some on the webinar, but we probably had easily 75 people in the room, which is almost capacity for these 2 rooms, actually. And the Klamath Falls meeting, again, we didn't really have a lot of good connections up there. I said if we get 25, 30 people, it'll be successful. We had almost 60 register. We probably had about 40, 45 in the room. We ended up having a tribal conflict that came up the last minute that a bunch of folks couldn't make it. But so we started asking ourselves, why are these so successful? And we came up with a couple of different thoughts. And first, in that as a boundary organization, the focus on climate, because that climate is the overarching theme of these, is that we're not specifically targeting a certain sector like hydrology or forestry issues or wildlife issues. We're not targeting a specific scale of government. You know, we don't talk to just federal, and you know, we're not just interested in federal employees or just state or local government or NGOs. That one of the surprising things about these, and I think why they've been so successful, is that this is a place where there's an opportunity for people from across all scales of government and across a wide variety of sectors to actually meet and talk with each other. And one thing that we've really focused on is giving people lots of time to talk. If you'll notice on the agenda today, I have half an hour breaks scheduled, which has anybody in here ever been to a meeting that had half an hour breaks? Scott has. Awesome. Well, the one at the Upscore meeting, we had a half an hour break. And we like to give good breaks because one of the real values of these meetings is giving people a chance to meet each other and talk to each other. So I think as we move forward in the coming decades, you know, with funding challenges, potential changes and things influencing resource decisions, community health, it's going to be really important to have these kind of personal relationships where you've met people from different agencies working in different sectors on different problems. And you know, you have at least a rough idea of who to call if you have a question or if you need to work on solving a problem that is bigger than one sector or one scale of government, that you already have these relationships and you know you have an idea of who people are and how to work with each other. And so I think these types of meetings will be increasingly important as we move forward. Just a real quick overview. So the questionnaires that I'm always demanding that people fill out for me, both at the beginning and the end of the day, I do look at all of those and I've aggregated them. And just to give you an idea, who attends, we have a lot of federal employees that have attended in the past. We have good representation from almost all sectors. When I'm looking at this meeting and registrations, I'm guessing that we have more local government and fewer federal employees. And I think that has to do with the sequester is definitely affecting that. I've also made an effort to really reach out to local and state governments this time, and I think that I've succeeded in hopefully getting some folks here from what I can see with the registrations. And again, you can see we have a wide variety of sectors that we cover as well. And obviously the other category is too big, and so I've made some modifications on the questionnaire actually, so I can hopefully begin parsing out what that other category is. One of the questions that we always ask on the slides is how many times a month do you use climate or weather related information? And we were really surprised to see how high that was. If you look at just the green, blue, and pink, that's a really big proportion. You know, the federal numbers are a lot higher because we have a greater percentage of federal employees that have come. But if you look at the local and state, the local in particular uses climate information, basically more than half, many times a month, if you kind of aggregate that all together. And so that's another thing that tells us that the idea of climate and using climate as a unifying theme for these forums really has a lot of attraction and a lot of relevance for people. Because that often I think those climate related decisions are kind of hidden. And one of the goals of this climate forum is to bring those decisions more up to the front and actually thinking about them in a thoughtful way and having a discussion with your colleagues from other agencies and institutions about how you use climate and what are the challenges in using climate information and data. I also ask on every pre-card, what are your top 3 climate-related concerns? And so I dumped all of those, I typed those in, and then I just dumped them into a little product, a little Java applet called a Wordle. And it basically looks at how often a word occurs, uses an algorithm to then size it. And it should be of no surprise that water and drought are in fire, it's not showing up too well up there, are the two biggest, the three top issues. It's just a quick and dirty way to kind of actually get at what people are concerned about. Upcoming forums, these are kind of constantly evolving and where we hope to go with them. So last year we had forums in Reno, both the spring and the fall. We're going to move to a schedule where the Reno forum will be in the spring. The fall forum is going to float around the edges of the Great Basin. This fall is going to be somewhere in the southern edge of the Great Basin. We haven't decided yet, maybe Bishop, maybe Tonopah, but somewhere down on the south end. They're going to continue to be experimental, so we'll play with both the topics that are covered, how we organize the day, based on feedback from the cards. We are going to, this time, for example, we are doing longer presentations, but fewer. We had a number of comments where people wanted more in-depth presentations and not have the schedule as filled with short ones, and so we're working on that. So based on everybody's feedback today, we'll kind of assess how well that worked or didn't work. But they will continue to focus on current management issues that are related to climate. And that's all I have for this, and we'll move forward with our next speaker. Really briefly, the Southwest Technical Report was released this week, I believe. It was rolled out. That is a supporting report, regional document for the National Climate Assessment. Both Kelly Redman, Dave Bush, and Erica Fleischman were authors, I believe. Erica, you were a lead author for one chapter as well. Kelly, were you a lead author? No? Okay. So if you have any questions about that report, please talk to Kelly. Dave, will you wave your hand? I think everybody knows who. Come on, stand up. People can see you. There's Dave Bush. Erica is over here. Many of you probably remember her from last year. She was one of our speakers. And everybody knows Kelly. And there are also handouts on the table. And speaking of Kelly, I believe he is our next presenter. And one of the comments we got on cards was, give Kelly more time. So we have done that.